Hello, my name is Courtney Monroe, and today I will be reviewing two French textbooks that are 127 years apart. The textbook I have on the left here is titled First French Book, and it is from 1881. And the textbook I have on the right here, BNZ, was first published in 2008. On Amazon, if you go look over there, BNZ is worth about $50 right now, but newer versions and editions can cost up to $100. I couldn't find an exact price for our first French book here, but going off of what textbooks similar to this one were sold for around the same time, I'm going to go ahead and assume that it was most likely around less than $2 in 1881 money. Now, one thing that you might notice that is really different between these two books is their size. Our more modern textbook here, BNZ, looks pretty big. It's a little bit bigger than this big 5-subject notebook I have right next to it. I will note though that this BNZ is the teacher's edition, so it's probably a little bit bigger than the student textbook that you might see in the classroom. The older book, on the other hand, is definitely a lot smaller than any high school textbook today. I definitely have never had a book this small. Here I have it compared to a regular size composition notebook, so you can see how small it really is. These two books, they are similar, but only in the sense that they were both intended for high school beginners of the language, and that's about the only similarity between these two books. The insides are even more different than the outsides, and I'm going to go ahead and dive in and show you some of these differences. So our first French book here from 1881 has 2 pages in the beginning that explain how the book is supposed to be used and taught. This first page here refers to some methods used in the book that are pestalozzian, meaning that the information that is learned is from familiar information and the students are left to discover the answer. This means that they learn new things from relating them back to things that they already know. This book relies heavily on grammar. It's used to enable the learner to speak accurately, and it stresses the importance of using correct grammar in the language. Each chapter is structured pretty much the same way. It starts with a grammar concept. Usually this is some kind of verb conjugation or change to a verb conjugation, and then the language is learned through dialogues and paragraphs, which must be read aloud by the class. One thing you might notice about this textbook is that it says right here that the initial pages of instruction after this one, it's all in French without the help of the learner's vernacular, meaning that there is no English from here on out, which you wouldn't really see in any beginner textbooks here in the United States. One last interesting aspect of this book, at least in my opinion, and I noticed this as I was reading the book, is that almost all the nouns and conjugations in this are in the masculine form, and almost all of the names used in this book are male names, with the exception of Madame, Mrs., or the occasional female name every once in a while. But for the most part, everything is male. Now that we've looked at content from First French Book, we're going to go ahead and look at our book from 2008 and look at content from BNZ. Similarly to the last book, each chapter in this textbook is structured pretty much the same way. Each chapter has sections for vocabulary, grammar, culture, and application. You can see some of those here. Like many beginner language learning textbooks today, most of the instruction and content in this book is in English. As you go further in the book, more and more instruction is in French, but by the end of the last chapter, it's still pretty heavily English. Whereas many older textbooks focus on grammar, this textbook places equal importance on grammar and vocabulary and the application of those two together. Now, being about 100 years plus older than First French Book, BNZ is definitely more inclusive of gender and race. In each chapter that I looked at, females, males, and different races are all represented either in the text, in pictures, or even in vocabulary. So now that I've gone over a little bit about the content in these two textbooks, I'm going to go over 4 key differences that I noticed between these two books. So the first main difference between these two books is the instruction, definitely. The first French book practices inductive learning, meaning that the learners are not explicitly given rules, but rather they are provided with examples on the rule in action and left to figure out the rules themselves. As you'll notice here, though, some verb conjugations are given at the beginning of each lesson, but after that, that's the only explicit instruction found in the book. As you can see here, this is the second page, and it's already all in French. Beginner textbook completely in French. Even the little notes here are in French. Bien dit practices a much different approach to learning, though, called deductive learning. This means that, for the most part, any rules or vocabulary are explicitly given to the learner. As you can see here, it tells you the verb être is an irregular verb. This means that it does not follow, and it tells you exactly how to use it, exactly how to conjugate it. This is the most common approach seen today, and people still kind of argue over which one is more effective. The second major difference in these two books is the teacher instruction. Going back to our preface from First French book, you'll see that there are a lot of general rules, a whole list of general rules for how to teach this textbook, and it doesn't really look like there's much room for deviation. If we go over to our Bien dit, though, you'll see that the teacher instruction in this book, in my opinion, is pretty amazing. Not only are there general instruction methods at the beginning of the book, but each chapter begins with a day-to-day lesson plan that you can use as a guide, and there is definitely room for deviation. You see, this tells you about how many days it might take you to finish this whole chapter and how you can split it up. My favorite part about this book, though, is that on each page there's a little section at the bottom called differentiated instruction, and it gives the teacher tips on how to teach a lesson to different students. So this page has some tips for how to teach slower paced learners and special learning needs. And then this page here, there's some for advanced learners and intrapersonal of the multiple intelligences. The third difference, I'm just going to go over real quick. The first French book doesn't really offer or recommend any authentic learning materials, which are items from the target culture, like newspaper articles or books, things made for the culture, by the culture. To be fair, though, authentic materials might not have been very easy to come by in 1881. Bien dit, though, the 2008 book, offers a multitude of different authentic materials, such as articles, music, and they even make up a little dramatic TV show for the kids to watch. Now, I saved our biggest difference for last, and it's one that I found pretty interesting to look at. So to begin with, most of the vocabulary in our first French book is pretty old-timey by our standards. One of the lessons in this book is taught by using a dialogue that talks about inkwells and ink, which, we wouldn't really use because those aren't words that are in our normal vocabulary. But here on this page is what I found the most shocking. So the lesson that's being taught on this page is the negation of verbs, particularly the verb être, which means to be. So, you have je suis, which is I am, and je ne suis pas, I am not. So to teach this lesson, 3 pictures are provided. One is of a black man, one is of a Native American man, and one is of a Chinese man. So I'm going to go ahead and read this paragraph, starting right here and ending right here at the bottom of the page, and I'm going to translate as I go. Here we go. See here, a Negro. Are you a Negro? No, I am an American. The Negro is an African. Is the Indian not an American? Yes, but he is a savage. And what color is the Indian? He is red. Are you red? No, sir, I am not red. I am... Ah, you are white. And what color is the Negro? He is black. The Chinaman, is he white, black, or red? Oh, he is yellow. And ink? What color is it? It is black. Now, this is definitely not something that you would ever see in any kind of modern textbook, so I thought it was really interesting to see how racial attitudes have changed, especially in a textbook. It's very interesting to look into these two books and see not only how much societal attitudes have changed, but how much language instruction itself has changed in the past 127 years. In these books, everything from the vocabulary to the methodology has been drastically changed, and it makes me wonder, what might French textbooks look like in another 127 years, in 2145? With this current push for immersive language learning, I'd like to think that future textbooks will practice more inductive learning and total language instruction, like we kind of see in First French Book from 1881. I would also like to point out that many of the words used in this old book, such as inkwell and cité, are considered pretty old-timey by our standards. But what will future French learners think of our words, like our technology words? Will they still be used, or will they be considered old-fashioned or out of date? It's hard to tell exactly how language instruction will change in the future, but I think it's pretty safe to say that our textbooks will become pretty obsolete in the next 100 years, just like our little First French book here.